Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Tuba People TV, where we talk about Arnold Jacobs all of the time. We're here in Kirkwood, Missouri, just outside of St. Louis, Missouri, with Susan Slaughter. Susan, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for asking me, Mike.
Yeah. If you don't know, Susan spent 41 seasons. That's 4-1 seasons with the St. Louis Symphony, and the 37 of those as principal trumpet.
That's right.
Just an enormous record. Congratulations.
I guess I was really smart. I didn't burn out after 20 years. I used my assistant wisely. And by that I mean, you know, if you had a piece that was like a Bruckner piece that is very, very loud, and rather than you providing all that volume, the section sounds better if you had one more voice and everybody plays mezzo-forte, which was kind of right down Arnold Jacobs' alley.
Speaking of Mr. Jacobs, you also had studies with Mr. Jacobs.
Yes, I did. Around 1971, I was starting to have some problems in my playing. I'm certain this has happened to some people. You play a G on top of the staff, and suddenly your lip starts vibrating a G an octave lower, and that's not something you want in your sound. So I couldn't fix it. One of the teachers I went to heard it and said, "Don't do that." And I said, "Oh, all right." But they didn't help me fix it. So it came back again, and in 1971 I called Arnold Jacobs and asked him if he could see me, which he agreed to do.
What do you remember from that first lesson with Mr. Jacobs?
Well, it wasn't cheap, number one, but that was okay. When you're going to the person who probably can help you, it helps. You gladly pay whatever price it's going to cost if it's going to really help you. And I was confident that he could help me. The very first thing he did was not have me play, but he had me do some breathing exercises. So he handed me a tube, this will be familiar with everyone, put it in my mouth and said, just breathe in and out. And when I put it into my mouth, my tongue dropped down, and I realized right then that my tongue had gotten way too high when I was trying to breathe. So I could have stopped right then and said, okay, here's your $100. And, you know, but of course we didn't stop there. He went on. And I can elaborate about the things he taught me if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. He had, as everybody knows, he had a lot of different little, we'll call them instruments, and I don't mean musical instruments, but like medical instruments that he would take. And he had one in particular that, of course, everybody had one they breathed into where you could measure your volume of capacity of air. And the next one he had me breathe into was something, if you don't mind, I brought a little prop.
Yeah, sure,
okay.
Go ahead.
Everybody's probably heard about these inspirexes, okay?
Yep.
Well, in a sense, he had two inspirexes. One where you can inhale and bring the little ping pong ball up, and the other where you'd exhale and blow the ping pong ball up. Well, of course, I couldn't find that instrument, but when I used that and was breathing in and out as he was instructing me, which was, don't try to play so loud, just nice mezzo-forte, mezzo-piano, very gentle airflow, and then when he wanted me to do the same as breathing in, very gentle. So here we go. So he had a certain number 30. So when it starts to drop, turn it over and exhale. So it was something similar to that, but much more sophisticated. So as I would practice at home, I did not have the Inspirex then. I had just this tube that he had given me and the bag.
Okay.
So the bag was a 6-liter bag, I think. You know, you breathe in and out. And I could make it 3.5 liters. What I thought was interesting, he shared with me that he had had a medical problem as a child, and that he had lost one of his lungs, and that he himself now, with just one lung, had 3.5 liters of air. And he knew he was going to continue playing the tuba. He had to maximize everything that he had. And so he began studying the body and finding out how everything works with the breathing. And so he was incredibly knowledgeable. And I think that each person who came in, he was able to see what they were doing and immediately analyze a way to help them.
And as I recall from reading in your addition to D. Stewart's book, when you were, that initial lesson, he did measure your lung capacity on the spirometer, and you had about 3.5 liters also. So there was some simpatico in terms of your lung volumes.
Indeed. I mean, I have both of my lungs, and I could have played tuba, huh? But anyway, it was interesting. Now, he also talked about people who had 7 liters of air, gentlemen who were very, very, very tall, and that they couldn't make the same phrases with their 7 liters of air that I was making with my 3.5.
Right.
And so it was all how you used air. It wasn't how big you were or how tall you were. It's how you used what you had.
Exactly.
And then he proved that by sharing his 3.5 liters, and I played tuba. So it was just very eye-opening.
Yeah.
For a young player, I was probably 25, 26 then.
Yeah. And did you have get immediate results from that first lesson in 1971? Did you notice anything? Did you leave the studio encouraged, or did it take some period of time?
Well, it took a little bit of time to get your body to be adjusted to what he was saying, but it all made sense to me, so it was worth pursuing. So I would say maybe one of the things that I had gotten into the habit of doing was trying to play too loud. So when you play on stage, you hear all of this brass sound around you, and you think, as the principal trumpet, that you need to be on the top of that volume. So I'd gotten into the habit of working too hard. Also, one of the things he talked about was women sometimes think they have more support if they bear down, like childbirth. Well, that doesn't help you with the trumpet. It only helps you with childbirth. so that was enlightening, and so he just had me play something, and I didn't think it sounded very good, but he said, "Oh, that was beautiful. That was wonderful." His voice.
Yeah.
And so he was very complimentary, and so that made you relax and think, well, maybe I don't sound as bad as I think I do. And he was just very kind and talked about just playing. Instead of playing fortissimo, don't play above a mezzo-forte. And when you get ready to play louder, play a fuller mezzo-forte. You want to play louder than that? Play a fuller mezzo-forte. And what that did, it kept me from using more tension.
Wow, so just the term mezzo-forte psychologically kept you in that place of less
tension.
Yeah, less tension. It wasn't necessarily saying play less loud. It was just, from a psychological standpoint, a more relaxed mezzo-forte plus. Wow.
It really worked for me.
That's great.
So,
and he didn't hear you play a note before he worked with you on the tube and everything.
No, we just went with the breathing, and
you described your situation, and he went right to work.
Yes, and he just said it just sounds like an air problem. So, the other thing that we did, as we were going through the register, when I did play, he wanted me to start lower where everything was perfect.
Yeah.
And gradually move that up through the area that I was having trouble with. So when I got up to around E and F and G on top of the staff, that's where the problem would start to occur. Above G was fine. Below G was okay. About F, G, and E was a little bit of a problem. So he said, take what's good, move it up through where you're having problems, and extend the good part through the bad part, through the troubled area, I should say.
Sure. Let the good teach the bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm wondering what after that initial lesson in 1971, did you return for more lessons?
Oh, I did, absolutely. What he was doing with me was helping me correct a problem that I had developed, and it was nobody's fault Not the horn. Be nice if I could blame the horn, but it wasn't the horn, it was me. And so taking that area that was working and moving it through the area that wasn't working so well was an excellent way to try to fix the problem. And it didn't create a lot of tension. The only tension I had was, before I could get this all implemented into my playing and fixed, is getting on stage in a concert, having to play those notes that were beginning to get better, but I wasn't confident that they were fixed yet. That's the only time I really got tense. The other thing I liked about what he did, he would say he wanted me to work on my attacks, and to start the attack, the note, with the same sound and clarity of well, I don't want to say purity is probably a better word, of sound, right immediately with the attack. So he would say, now play this note, I want you to go da 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 da, hold it. It sounded better than my voice. And then start right, let's say that note, when you get to the middle of it, as you're holding it, is perfect. That's right where you want to start, right there. So try to take that point and move it to the beginning. So boom, there it is. Boom, and start there. Boom, and do some attacks, all in different ranges. But the other thing he had me do is kind of interesting. I did it because I thought he said to do it. If you go to somebody and take a lesson from them, if you don't do what they say, then don't turn around and say it doesn't work,
right,
if you haven't tried it. So he wanted me to buzz a lot with the mouthpiece, and not do exercises, but play melodies. Okay? So part of his thing was to use a lot of vibrato, and I tend to play with a little touch of vibrato, but this was more extreme.
Yeah.
And I think he was trying to help the muscles or whatever in the embouchure, without saying anything about it, help them vibrate a little bit more evenly. And so I think with that octave that I could play holding one note and play the lower octave, something in the embouchure wasn't vibrating at the same speed. So
maybe finding that sweet spot. The vibrato would help you find that sweet spot of tone.
So lots of mouthpiece playing. So I end up putting a mouthpiece in my car, and I drive to work. I buzz, and play melodies. The other thing that works well for me is I can get really stuck if I focus too much on exercises. And what is better for me is to be playing melodies, and whether that's a hymn, whether that's Carnival of Venice, but not the technical part, just the lyrical part, because then I can focus on what I want to do with the melody. There's a lot that you can say with the various melodies you're handed by composers, so to speak. Whether it's John Adams or Mahler, there's a lot there. And if you focus on what you can say musically, if you can tell a story, then that's better than thinking about how am I going to play this first attack? How am I going to do this crescendo? Well, in my mind, I often would put words to the music and then try to develop that storyline as I'm playing.
Yeah.
And it takes away that urge to say, now, where do I put my tongue for this attack? Or is my note going to shatter if I go for that F? You have words to the melody, and you just put that out there.
Is that something that he suggested you do, or is that something you've been doing already, the words?
That's something I was doing already,
okay,
but he really emphasized that, song and air or something.
Song and wind?
Song and wind,
yeah.
Thank you. The song and wind, and when he talked about the song, it just connected even more. That the song takes care of the wind in a sense.
Yeah.
So that's where I went. The song takes care of the wind. The song makes the wind work properly, or helps the wind work properly.
Yeah, when you're thinking of those the words, because they are so closely attached to the melody or the note you're going to play, that really eliminates a lot of space in your thoughts for what if. Or will this? All those kind of question mark thoughts.
Well, and you totally focused on. I mean, think about pop music. The singer, male or female, sings about, oh, I love my, better half or whatever.
Yeah.
And they get really caught up in that.
Yeah.
Well, we have just notes, and if we can also put words to those notes, then we can get caught up in the story rather than bogged down with the technical part.
Yeah. Getting back to the, just your, when you would have to take the stage during this period of time, just transition after that initial lesson or two, when you would get to a note that was not yet where you wanted to be in the practice room, did he offer you any advice on how to approach such times?
One of his things was make a statement. Don't ask a question. When you get ready to play, you're playing a brass instrument. You can't act like you're, if you had a swimming pool in front of us and we want to know how warm the water is, we'd probably go, we'll put our toe in it or we'll put our fingers in it. You can't do that with a brass note. You have to make a statement. Don't ask a question. So that helps. As I would get ready to play those notes, I'm thinking, right or wrong, I got to make a statement, and I would just go for it. Even though somewhere in the back of my mind, it might have a little bit of concern, fear, and then as I employed or used that idea of making a statement, it became easier for me not to be concerned about those notes.
Yeah.
And then also they started improving.
Yeah, you start to have more repetitions of success.
Mm-hmm.
That became the habit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And with the elongated notes, getting back to the initiate, the articulation and the sound, just the immediacy of sound. That immediacy of sound, working with the longer note, was he asking you to imagine then you taking that sound from the middle of the note and imagining what it would be at the front of the note? Is that what he did with you?
I think, even though he tried to stay away from feeling and all of this, he wanted you to get to the center of that note and where everything was working properly.
Yeah.
Sometimes you make an attack, everything's not coordinated and going right. But when you get to the middle of the note, then everything's vibrating right, the air is right, usually, Right. And if you can have a sense then, or a picture in your mind, again, we're going back to more of a picture rather than a feeling, but also you have that feeling. This feels great, I hear it, then you want to go back to the beginning and start with that. And that was where he was trying to take me. And, I don't know that I was doing a tuba attack.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they was, but who knows what I did in the lesson, And he may have heard that and said, oh, we got to fix that, And so that's how he approached it.
Great. So did it ever cross your mind, being an established trumpet player, it would be kind of strange to go get a lesson with a tuba player because the instruments are so different, the requirements?
Well, certainly they're different. The principal horn, Roland Pandolfi, had studied for several years with Arnold Jacobs. He, before coming to St. Louis, was the principal horn in the Milwaukee Symphony. Mm. So he had a lot of insight into what Arnold had to offer. And so when I started having some problems, the first thing you do is talk to your colleagues and see if they have any ideas. He said, you should go see Jacobs. Just go right now. Here's his phone number, call him. So I did. I didn't delay at all. But no, it never occurred to me that it should be a problem. The only thing that I discovered maybe a few years after trying to implement all of these ideas, Arnold was saying to say toe, okay? And then he said, when you take a breath, take a backwards toe. Okay, well that would work great, and I think it probably, because the tuba mouthpiece is so big, you can do that. I couldn't really keep my seal here and go toe through the center and be ready to play, so I had to develop, going back to using the corners and trying to keep the contact with the mouthpiece with the lips.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of toe and the openness that it created in your mouth was still what I tried to do. That's the only thing I would say. If it wasn't a perfect fit, that might be the only thing.
Okay. What was your period of study with Mr. Jacobs, 1971 until approximately?
Whoa, late 80s, early 90s. Once I got everything rolling and got his concept working for myself, then I would go every maybe 5 or 6 years and for a little tune-up.
Yeah.
You know, and if I felt like maybe some old habits were coming in, there's something about just hearing his voice.
Yeah.
And being in his presence and knowing that he has all of this knowledge and he can help fix what's going on.
Right. Was there, you being already established in the St. Louis Symphony, what was that relationship like in terms of, the collegiality with when you stepped into his studio?
I always felt welcome. I never felt that he thought any less of me because I was a woman. I felt that he really respected me, and obviously he was willing to take me on as a student. And
right.
It was a great experience, but it was going to his house was kind of an unusual experience because you go in and there's his wife and maybe her mother. I can't try to remember. There's a couple of people sitting there, and then you went down to the basement, and the basement was not finished in the way a lot of our basements are now.
Yeah.
But lots of stuff sitting around, tons of tubas, and it was just kind of amazing to sit there. But no, I always felt very welcomed and developed a relationship with his wife. Not so much they invited me to dinner, don't get me wrong. But just she began to recognize me by name and would say hello to them and visit a few minutes while he was finishing up with another student. But and I always felt like he gave me 100% of his attention. That you were the most important thing to him right then.
Mm-hmm.
The most important person that he was going to try to help, and he really wanted to help people. So that was the other thing. It was a good. If you want to have somebody who is your idol, so to speak, and idolize, and you want to mimic in them what they have done, he was very good at giving you 100% of his attention. He didn't let the phone ring and interrupt him, or run upstairs to do something else while he left you downstairs. No, you have all of his time, all of his attention, and I greatly appreciated that.
Did he ever interrupt a lesson to go watch an episode of Star Trek?
Not while I was there, no.
Okay. There's a few stories that when Star Trek came on, the lesson was put on pause. We'd all go up and watch Star Trek and then come back down and continue the lesson.
That must have been late at night.
Must have been, or some of those TV reruns. Did you, so by the time he moved to the Fine Arts Building in the mid-'70s or so, did you find yourself at lessons there then, subsequently? Okay.
Yes. I think I had at least 3 or 4 lessons there, if not more. But and that was a little easier to find than his house.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we had several lessons there.
And so, just in terms of the overall headline from your experience with Mr. Jacobs, what would you say he did for you, just in sum total?
Well, I suppose in a lot of ways he saved my career. Mm-hmm. If I couldn't have figured out how to get that buzzing in the lower octave to stop, then it just would have gotten worse. So the other thing he did was communicate that I had a lot of talent and that this was not going to be a problem to fix. And everything was very calming that he said, very reassuring. And I think that had I tried to go it alone and not seek help, that I might not have been able to figure it out. I think there's a lot of things we can figure out on our own because you have to be your own teacher for several, when you're a student, 6 days a week, you get to see the teacher on the 7th day, but when you're a professional, you don't have time to go running off to get advice from people. But when you do have a problem, you need to take the time and go get other opinions.
I think it's important also just to note that in this period, starting in 1969 with your entry into the St. Louis Symphony, there was a lot more pressure on you as a female than there would have been in those days on your male counterparts, just because you were a female. And that's something I don't know that the younger people watching this episode may be all that aware of in terms of that there was extra weight on you to succeed.
Well, at least I certainly put that weight on myself. But I would say, yes, there were people who did not want me to succeed, and that it really was up, to me to not fail. And if I did fail, I didn't want it to be because I hadn't put every effort in to be successful. So, for instance, when I first got to the orchestra in 1969, I was the fourth trumpet. And the first trumpet was Chandler Getting, and we were doing Zarathustra. So we would get into rehearsal, and he might miss the call to the high C, maybe once, and then he'd miss it once in performance, and that was okay. And he made a kind of a comment. He said, "Oh, you don't want him to think it's too easy." So I got a kick out of that. But I did not feel that I had that privilege to make a mistake. I felt like I could not make mistakes. And I'm not saying I didn't miss notes. I did miss notes. But I think there's a little bit of difference between missing notes and then coming in the wrong spot. And there's a little bit difference missing the notes the next day and the day after. So if I missed something, I would not miss it the next day, and I would not mix it the next time through. Mm-hmm. So what's the first piece that we recorded in April 1974? Zarathustra. So we got to that call. Well, also the manager of the orchestra, I don't think he was too happy with a woman being hired to be principal trumpet. And he told the conductor, he said, "She won't be able to do it. You're going to have to probably take her to a studio and get them to fix this and everything."
Wow.
So, when I heard that, I thought, when I heard that, I thought, you know what? I'm not going to miss it. I'm never going to miss it. Another story was Edo de Waart came in the 80s and doing Zarathustra again, and we got to that spot, and every rehearsal he'd go over it 5, 6, 7 times, and he'd say, "Flutes, woodwinds, you're not together," or something. He'd go over again, over again, over again. So dress rehearsal, he went over it 5 times, and I never missed it. Okay.
Wow.
He went over it 5 times, and I thought, this is crazy. I know what he's trying to do, but I'm not giving in. So I leaned over to the second trumpet, and I said, "Roger, how many times have we played that?" 23. He had me play it 23 times.
Wow.
One of the violas came up to me and said, "Why don't you just miss it and get it over with?" I said, "If you want to hear me miss it, I'll play it for you right now and miss it on purpose. But I'm not missing it."
That is not dissimilar to the story that Mr. Herseth would sometimes.
Well, it has some similarities.
Yeah. Wow.
So I didn't ask. I thought about toying around with it and taking it down the octave, starting up the octave and going down, just to fiddle around. And I thought, well, why should I lower myself to what he's doing? So I'll just do my job, and he'll eventually do his.
Yeah. Eventually.
I never heard the woodwinds get any worse or better going over that spot 23 times, but anyway. As my teacher used to say, this is Herb Mueller, he said, once they start the concert, they can't stop. So.
That's good.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you had many teachers, not just Mr. Jacobs. Maybe I'd be really curious what your memories are, just what each of those teachers in your background did for you throughout your training.
Well, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to go back to high school.
Great.
Because I think if you have a successful music career, you look back and see that somewhere in your high school there was a band director or an orchestra director who encouraged you to pursue music one way or another.
Right.
Maybe he didn't use those words or she didn't use those words, but you were encouraged and your imagination was growing at what could I do with my life.
I couldn't agree more, yeah.
So the band director's name was Bob Myers. He was a trombonist, and he taught me for 2 years. At the end of the 2 years will be my sophomore year. He says, "I've taken you as far as I can take you, and I recommend you go to study with the first trumpet in Indianapolis Symphony." So I tried to get in with him, but his schedule was full. Now, whether it was really full or not, I don't know. And it could have been that he thought, well, she'll probably just get married and it'd be a waste of my time. Who knows? So I never found, I don't even want to find out. It doesn't even matter. So he gave me to a student of his. Dan Minter was his name. And Dan gave me a 1-hour lesson on trumpet, and he was a theory major too, and a 1-hour theory lesson.
Oh.
So it was really awesome because I played by ear, and I could hear all these chords in my head, but I didn't necessarily know what I was hearing, or knew exactly what to write down. The other thing my high school band director did was took me to a kind of a semi-professional brass band. Actually, maybe it was a regular band, but some people in the section played in the symphony. I think Paul Hingelman, I'm trying to get his last name, second trumpet in Indianapolis Symphony, played first cornet in this band, and I sat down on third and could hear what he was doing. So Mr. Myers just really opened a lot of doors in my mind to to be exposed to people who are really good players. Well, then I went to Indiana University, and Herbert Mueller was my teacher. However, he didn't hear my audition. That was just the teacher that my teacher in high school recommended that I study with. So when he came in for the first lesson, I had signed up for a Bachelor of Music degree. And without hearing me play, he said, well, I'm your counselor now, and I see that you've signed up for Bachelor of Music. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, I recommend that you move to an education degree. And I thought, well, you haven't heard me play. And remember, you don't know this maybe, but I grew up on a farm. So I was not the most outgoing person. I was really pretty shy. And I said, well, Mr. Mueller, you haven't heard me play yet. Could we delay that until the next semester? And if you think that I should switch to education, then I'll switch. And he says, okay. He never brought it up again.
Wow.
In my junior year, I went to, this is 1966, went out to Aspen Music Festival, and Robert Nagel was there. And I think a lot of things were about ready to click and fall in place in my playing. And I was amongst other trumpet players I didn't know, some from Juilliard, some from other places in the country. So, it created a new form of competition. You were assigned to what you played, but of course, the better you played, the better part that you got. So it was a good time, and the ideas that those other folks brought with them from their teachers. So Mr. Nagel really helped things click, and that was a great experience for me. Plus, there was another woman there named Joyce Johnson, who eventually got married, and Hamilton's her last name now. Lives out I think in San Francisco now. And she was an outstanding player, just incredible. And so I got to see that a woman was doing very well. And she was principal trumpet at that time of the Portland Symphony, now called the Oregon Symphony. So Mr. Nagel, then where do we go from there? I got the job in Toledo, Ohio in 1967, principal trumpet. There was another place where they had the call from Zarathustra, and the conductor had me play it 5 times in the audition, and finally I said, do you want something different? And he said, no, I just can't believe that you can hit it every time. And I said, oh, okay. So from there, while I was there, I started with Bernie Edelstein, and Bernie was just over in Cleveland there, and he had a lot of good ideas orchestrally, taught me a lot about what Zell was doing. So I just felt like there's a wealth of knowledge there.
Yeah.
I'd also had the opportunity to be in Louis Davidson's brass repertoire class at Indiana University. And every week I would go in and sit down on the bottom as a freshman, and then as I got older and more familiar with the repertoire, he would move me up. But so I just had a lot of opportunities as a young player. So we talked about Arnold Jacobs, and that was probably in 71. In the early 80s, I was not happy with my upper register. And another gentleman in town had studied with Claude Gordon. So I thought, I think I'll go out and see if he'll let me take some lessons. So about twice a year, for about maybe 5 or 6 years, I would take a lesson with Claude Gordon.
Wow.
And try to improve my upper register and figure out what was going there. The things he talked about, again, I went in like I'm a total idiot, tell me what I need to do, and sometimes I think students come in with a preconceived idea that they know a lot and you can't tell them anything, and I went into the lesson with, I don't know anything, tell me everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then that way I could learn, and they didn't feel I was resisting what they were saying.
Yeah.
So I worked with him, and it was interesting. After 6 months, one of the horn players that was sitting in front of me turned around and said, I don't know how to say this, but you sound like you're getting better. You sound like you're improving. He says, and I don't mean that as that you weren't good before, but so people recognized that Claude's routine was helping me, probably technically, and the range was getting more solid. You know. So anytime I felt like I had a problem, I would seek out a teacher who had some expertise in that area that I felt that I was weak.
That's great. That's very, very commendable. What a great example.
Well, it's, you know, you can try to go it alone, but you have to realize that you're doing so much playing in the orchestra, so many different types of music, that sometimes you compromise yourself physically to get the notes out.
Yeah.
And then if you do that, then you have to realize you've done it. And when you can't undo it, then you have to have some help. It's just like when you're teaching, you might start doing what the student's doing. Like, oh no, I got their problem now. Oh,
right.
Now I got to fix it. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
You have to figure out how to fix it for yourself so you can fix it for them. So I just think it's always good to open yourself up to getting some help. And if you can't humble yourself to that level and just be more accepting of what people have to say, then don't waste your money. But if you really, really want help and really, really want to be open to what people have to say, and then try it. Really honestly try it, and if it works, great. You've got something that you not only have for yourself, that you can share with other students.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win situation.
Fantastic. Well, we've been trying to get together for the last couple of years,
Yeah.
and I'm so thankful that we were able to meet today and to talk about Mr. Jacobs. And Puddles, we pre-gifted this genuine Tuba People TV water bottle. Because
You too can have one.
Miss Slaughter was thirsty at the beginning of the interview, so we pre-gifted it to her so it could be of use throughout this interview.
And I have been sneaking drinks all along.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and for your memories and for taking the time to come out and meet with us.
No, well, thanks for inviting me to do this.
And now back to you.